This is nowhere as creepy as other posts I've seen here before, but I figured it was my time to share. In my town, there used to be an abandoned prison. It has since been knocked down. It was in the middle of the woods, and it wasn't the kind of place you would just end up at accidentally. Every once in a while, police would patrol around, but for the most part, there was just barbed wire fences doing their job. Now, this wasn't a high security prison for serial killers or anything, but it held robbers and rapists and the like up until about 8 years prior to the incident. It was unsettling during the daytime, especially as so much of it had been left behind, as if the place was abandoned in a hurry, but it was downright creepy at night. Well, in high school, my friend Nick and I loved exploring. We went all over, including an abandoned mental hospital that was only a couple miles from the jail. Growing up in the area, we knew that there was a small hole under the fence in one area, which was the only way to access the jail. One night, we made our normal trip under the hole and were walking around the area outside the jail. We were moving as quietly as we could because, as I said before, occasionally police would patrol the area. They would just park their cars on the opposite side of the fence from where we entered, so we wouldn't be able to see them if they were there. Eventually, we were pretty sure there were no police, so we began being a little louder and turned our flashlights on. I should mention now that other than the occasional policeman who parks their car on the outside of the fence, we had never seen any other person anywhere near the jail, let alone inside the fenced area. We were hesitant to enter the jail itself, first because how scary it was at night, and second because it's a pain in the ass to get into the jail itself during the daytime, let alone at night. So instead, we would kind of just walk around the outside for a while, as we normally do, scaring ourselves for the fun of it. Anyway, eventually we started to work up the courage to go inside the jail so we could make the long trip to the other side, where we knew the entrance was. We were walking along the side of the jail where the cells were, which had these huge windows. These were so from the outside, when the jail was in use, you could see all the inmates and what they were doing. As we were walking, a light turns on from inside one of the cells that we were only feet away from. We can't really see anything inside, just one beam of a flashlight which points upwards, then turns directly at us. At first, we just froze in terror. As I said before, we had never seen anyone in there before. Who would be sitting inside a cell, totally silent and in the darkness as a couple teenage boys walked by the outside? We couldn't imagine that it was a fellow thrill seeker like us. It was not the kind of place you would sit alone in the dark in. A homeless person? We didn't think that they would have a flashlight, and anyway, we assumed that the cops must look through the inside during the day every once in a while. Could it be a police officer? There's no reason why he would be sitting inside of the building, waiting, while he would have known that we were there for a long time. After a few seconds, we sprinted away as fast as we could. I didn't even turn around to see if we were being followed or anything. We just found the hole under the fence and got out of there. So we wonder to this day, who was sitting inside of the abandoned jail cell in the dark, presumably watching two boys walk around outside, then waiting until we were only feet away to announce his presence by turning on a flashlight. I assume that we'll never know the answer to that question, and I don't really want to know. We never went back at night, and the place is gone now. Back when I was in high school, my friends and I loved exploring creepy places. A few of us had our driver's license, so on weekend nights, we would gather up in a group of 6 to 10 people and go on an adventure. One summer, our favorite place to go was this abandoned movie theater on the west end of town. This place had closed down probably about 3 years before we started visiting it, and in that time, it had become a rundown building. There were no trespassing signs on the front entrance and each of the fire exits around the building, coming from the theater rooms. The glass on the main entrance was all broken and had been boarded up. The front door was busted and didn't latch or lock, so people were able to get inside. We knew that there had been homeless people crashing in there, but we were young and dumb and felt invincible in a group. It was part of what made it scary. We would always wait until between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. to go to places like this because we didn't want anyone else to see or hear us and report us to the police. We all explored it together the first 2 times we went in. The screens and seats were all torn up inside each of the maybe 8 rooms. The bathroom mirrors were broken and there was graffiti everywhere. We were fairly sure that there were people hiding in there while we were inside, even if we never saw anyone the first 2 times we went in. There were a couple shopping carts from a nearby Fred Meyer inside with cans and bottles in them, and a few dirty blankets scattered around in different rooms. It looked lived in. After getting to know the layout of the place the first couple trips, we made a game of it on the 3rd and final visit. This time, the 6 of us went in and split up into 3 groups of 2, and with our partner, the 2 of us would enter the front together and spend 5 full minutes inside, while the others waited outside at our chosen exit in the back of the building. The first 2, Beck and Doug, went in the building while we waited outside. About 7 minutes went by, and just when we were starting to worry that we should go inside after them, they made it out the other side through the fire exit. Doug told us that they went to the upstairs office and there was a sleeping bag that hadn't been there the last visit. As soon as they went up there, they saw it. They tried to leave immediately, but they got turned around and tried to leave through the wrong exit, which was sealed shut. They were paranoid that they were being followed out, so they just stood there, watching the way they entered the theater room for a minute, making sure they didn't hear any noises before they finally worked up the nerve to run out to the correct exit in the room across the hallway. Doug and Beck both wanted us to leave, but Jack and I weren't having any of that. We insisted on going in. Brad and Drew, the other group of 2 that were going in last, wanted to come with us, so the 4 of us went inside while Beck and Doug both waited by the exit. The first thing all of us wanted to do when we got inside was to go check the upstairs office. Just as we started making our way up the stairs, we all heard a loud banging sound. It was coming from the back of the theater. We all agreed it had to be Beck and Doug trying to scare us so that we would come out and we could leave. We got upstairs and the pounding stopped. Doug was right, there was a sleeping bag rolled out on the ground with a few paper bags set around it. Brad flashed a light on them and saw a syringe and something that looked like a vibrator. We were all pretty grossed out and had a little laugh about it. We looked around up there and didn't really notice anything else interesting. We started back down the stairs when the pounding started again. We decided we should probably start making our way to the exit. I hoped that we hadn't been caught trespassing by the police. We come through the exit and immediately both Doug and Beck were talking over themselves, telling us about a minute after we entered the theater, a really tall, creepy looking homeless man with greasy hair walked right past them, heading for the entrance. Beck said hello as he passed and the guy stopped. He turned and kind of lunged a few inches towards him before stopping. One side of his face was really wrinkly. Beck thinks that maybe he was a burn victim or something. The guy stared him down for a second and then, without saying anything, turned and walked to the corner where we had just gone inside. They started pounding on the door right after he was out of sight, trying to warn us that there was a scary dude in there with us. We were in there for about 5 minutes with this guy and we never saw him. He had to have heard us and hid somewhere. We started to walk back to our car in the Fred Meyer parking lot, about 100 yards away from the theater. A car pulled into the parking lot and shined their headlights at us before flashing its red and blues. The police officer had us sit down in front of a spotlight in front of his car and asked us what we were doing. We told him that we were going to head inside the movie theater, but a really scary tall guy walked in and we chickened out. He told us that it's really dangerous to go into places like that, as there had been violence in that building before, and it would be a shame if we got hurt doing something stupid. He let us go, and as we drove off, we saw him shining his light in the front entrance. We took the nice police officer's advice and never went back into a place like that again. I never did find out what violence he was talking about. It could have just been a tactic to scare us out of coming back. we stuck to graveyards and cemeteries after that. So, creepy dude that lives in a condemned building, I'm glad I never actually met you. But thank you for getting us out of a ticket for trespassing. And thanks to everyone else hiding in that building for not assaulting myself or my friends. So when I was 17 or so, I decided to become a novice urban explorer. I lived in rural Minnesota, so there was no shortage of abandoned places to visit if you knew where to look. Anyways, my boyfriend at the time lived in a tiny community just north of now then, Minnesota, which had a 2-story house that had been abandoned for about 10 years. The story was that a tree fell on the side of the house during a storm, and the guy didn't want to pay for the repairs and just left. I talked to my boyfriend about exploring that place, but since there was a convenience store right across the street, you would need to evade detection, so he pointed out that we would have to go at night. So we set our time to explore it on a Friday the 13th of that year, 2013. The crew we had was me, my boyfriend, and 3 other guys. Anyway, fast forward to the action. It was around 10 p.m. and my boyfriend parked his car on the dirt road about a quarter mile away from the house. We really didn't want to get caught. We hiked in and decided to take a look at the backyard first. It was really overgrown with waist-high prairie grass and generally uneventful until we looked into the back windows of the house. One of them seemed to go into a pantry where there was still some canned food on the shelf. The door to the pantry was open, and from what we could see from there was a full set of living room furniture, couches and all. This kind of leads me to disbelieve the whole "he left because of fallen tree" thing. It seems like this guy who lived there left in a hurry. Our original plan was to go in through the back door, but it was locked with some industrial grade shit. We went around to the front of the house, which had a screened-in porch that was unlocked, and we were able to look in around the porch area. Knee-high stacks of Life magazine were absolutely everywhere, some of them dating back to the 80s. They were weather-worn and chewed through by animals. After fooling around in there for around 10 minutes, we decided to embark inside. Naturally, being a 17-year-old girl in a group of 19-year-old guys, I was elected the one to open the door. But once I put my hand on the doorknob, I heard a noise from the other side of the solid oak door. 4 deliberate, rapid-fire knocks. Everyone booked it the fuck out of there faster than I've ever seen. We ran the entire way back to my boyfriend's car, but it wouldn't start. Everyone was afraid to go outside, and one of my friends kept claiming that they heard footsteps coming towards us. Probably bullshit in hindsight. After a few long minutes, my boyfriend's car finally started, and we punched it back to the house. Once we got back, everyone had their speculations on what the fuck was on the other side of that door. My personal theory that there was a squatter inside that saw us snooping around and wanted to scare us away. I know that dilapidated houses can make weird noises, but the knocks we heard were very deliberate, not something a structural shift or animal could make. To this day, I have not visited that house again, or any other abandoned house in the area. So kids, if something seems like a bad idea, it probably is. And creepy squatter guy, let's not meet again.
I am going to preface this by saying I was incredibly naive. My best friend Jay used to work at a restaurant in a very bad area. She had moved there from our little suburb about 35 minutes away. I still lived in the suburb with my parents, so my street smarts weren't the best. This was 3 years ago. I was 19 at the time, so driving around to visit friends was and is one of my favorite pastimes. One day, I decided to stop by the restaurant to see Jay, as I'd done it a few times before, and I was friends with all her co-workers. My friend was busy, and she made me wait around with a few of the others for a bit until her break. Then came to chat with me. At this time, I was very anti-purse, and just kept a wristlet, a little wallet you can keep around your wrist, After chatting for about 30 minutes, I left the restaurant and walked back to my car. After driving for a while, I noticed I had left my wallet. So I texted Jay telling her to grab it for me, and where I had probably left it. I already knew there was a possibility that it was gone, being that I left it in a busy restaurant in Center City, and Jay confirmed it was indeed gone. My dad cancelled all the credit cards, but I was still holding on to hope that it would be returned, as I did have my ID in there. The next day, I got a text from Jay. She tells me someone called the restaurant and said they had my wallet, and that she had given them my number. I was really happy about this, but knew I would have to meet up with a stranger, so I decided not to tell my parents. I didn't get a text until the next morning. The person said that they had my wallet and wanted to give it back, but never had a name or description. I didn't care. I thanked them profusely and asked when I could meet them. Hours later, they replied with an address and told me to stop by around 9 p.m. The address was about 20 minutes from the restaurant, which was also a really bad area, but that didn't worry me, as I had left my wallet right around there. I get there around 9, and this is when I started to get freaked out. The house looked like it was previously in a row home, but the one connecting it to the rest had been demolished. The windows were boarded up, and there were no lights coming from inside. The place was obviously abandoned. Grass overgrown, weeds everywhere, graffiti all over it, you get the idea. The door, however, was not boarded up, and I could see it was ajar. I texted the number, and the person replied a second later telling me to come in. It was early summer, so while it wasn't completely dark out, it was getting there, and I would have needed a flashlight to see. So what do? Well, I turn on my flashlight, of course. I get out of the car and look around in hopes of seeing someone. Nothing. So with phone flashlight in hand, I start walking up the dry rotted wooden steps to the front door. I crack the door open further. It's completely black, and when I shine my flashlight around, I can see there's no furniture. I thought I heard some quiet creaking from the upstairs, which I thought was strange. Why would the person text me to come in but then be hiding upstairs? At this point, I knew there was something wrong here. I was scared as hell, and I hightailed it back to my car. I should have pulled around the corner, but I didn't. I just called the police right there. 2 policemen arrived shortly after and walk right into the house with flashlights. Then 2 more pull up. They were inside for a long time. Then they come out. With them in handcuffs are 2 skinny, scraggly, homeless-looking guys. I only got a good look at one, but I do remember the guy had visible sores on his face and arms. I assume they could be drug-related. As the cops walked them by my car, one of the guys looked in at me with the angriest expression I've ever seen. 2 of the officers came over to talk to me, and had indeed found my wallet inside. All the money was gone, but the rest was intact. The cops reprimanded me for being so stupid. I drove home and never spoke of it to my parents. Only recently have I told them what happened. I'll never know what those guys were planning. Was it just someone messing with me? And I called the cops on 2 random homeless guys living there? I never got another text from that number. I started carrying a purse after that. Gross, creepy, abandoned housemen? Let's never meet again. Ever.
So this just happened about 2 hours ago, and I'm pretty shaken up. But as soon as I got out, the first thought that crossed my mind was to post my encounter as soon as I got home. So here I am. To give a little background, I'm a film student in college right now, and my buddies and I always try to find new locations to film movies at. I make horror films, so the places we were looking for and exploring are abandoned. And tonight, me and a group of friends, there were 10 of us in total, decided to check out this old abandoned hospital down the street from our school. They had been there before and said it was a great spot for filming and I should check it out. Tonight was that night. So when we get there, I have my Nikon DSLR with a handheld LED light attached to the top of it to scout out the place when we get inside. I didn't film any of the encounter because I usually only film the inside of these places, but I had the camera and the light on to shine the way through. I was leading the way down this narrow path that led to these walls that we had to climb to the roof of this place, where we would access one of the rooms to get inside the building. Because I was carrying my camera and bag, I was trying to look for another way up. So I walk a little further down the narrow path and I start noticing a lot of clothes and random shoes, cardboard boxes laying around the area. There was even an empty sleeping bag. That's when I knew that we probably weren't alone and were likely to run into someone if we made the wrong move, and boy, did we ever. One of my friends was walking behind me down the path and notices this door to my right. It's closed, and my guess was that it was locked and not worth trying. But he already had his hand on the door handle and started tugging. I look over and it barely cracks open, but something is holding it from the inside. I shine my LED light on the inside and I see a shirt tied to the inside of the door handle to another part of the room, acting as a lock. But my friend, being the way he is, tugs again and rips the shirt right off and the door swings open. Inside, there's someone sleeping on a table or a couch alongside with a group of terrifying looking people sitting up by a light inside the room. They all stop and stare at us. In the short glimpse that I got, my friend yells, "Oh shit, get the fuck out of here," and slams the door and just bolts past me. I was standing there, a little shaken, almost feeling like I should apologize, but I just follow him instead. My other friends are already on the roof at this point and ask what's going on. We just run for our lives out of the area. I heard the door in the path swing open, but I couldn't look back. From there, me and my friend get to a higher part of the area and away from the entrance leading to the hospital. There is a small gap that you could jump across to get to the roofs of the building that my other friends were on. About 4 of them follow us and jump across, ready to get out of there. But the others stay on the roof and watch us, stuck like statues. I look at them, confused on what they are staring at, and I begin to hear this metal dragging on concrete. I turn around, and there's this crazy looking man, maybe mid-20s, dragging a baseball bat with nails all along the end, walking towards us as he drags his bat along the concrete, acting just like Negan from The Walking Dead. My heart sinks. At this point, I turn off my light, and all that's shining is the moonlight. I kept my hand on my pocket knife, desperately trying to think of anything to do if he starts swinging, but I knew there was no way I would come out alive if he tried anything. Plus, I gotta take care of my camera. So he walks closer to us, and the first thing he says is, "You're gonna want to keep that light off." And everyone is silent. I'm practically shaking. He then starts circling around us and says, "You guys are never gonna come back here, right?" He walks past me and sees a camera and raises his bat saying, "And you're gonna put that fucking camera away." I just barely say, yeah, it's off." He looks over to my friends watching from the roof past the gap. He points to them and says, "Jump," and they stand silent. The guy says again, "Fucking jump across right now. Just run and jump, you'll make it." Keep in mind, this gap doesn't look bad, but the drop is fatal if you don't make the jump. My 4 friends are all staring down at the drop, fearing what could happen. One of them says, "I don't think I can make it." And the Negan guy replies, "Run and jump, or else you're gonna regret it." So my friend steps back, runs, and barely makes the jump. From there, one by one, the 3 others make the jump across, all while this Negan guy is standing right behind us with the bat, dragging it along the concrete. Once we all get across, he says, "You're never coming back here again. You understand?" We awkwardly apologize and run back to our car in the distance. I get in the car and look back at the area, and he's still standing there, watching us with his bat as we sped off. Realistically, we probably could have ganged up on him as a group if anything bad happened, but who knows who else was back there. Sadly, the hospital is a no-go from here on out, but I'm still looking around for some sick locations. What scared me the most about this was how fearless and disturbed this guy looked. He definitely seen some shit and had undoubtedly used that bat before on someone else. He looked like a killer, and it was his calmness that really got to me. Definitely learned a lesson, but regardless, let's not meet again.
This is something that happened about 1.5 years ago, my first year at uni. I'd like to preface this by saying that it's partially my and my friend's own fault for being rascals and putting ourselves in a potentially precarious situation. It's a cool fall evening, but it's nice out. The sky is clear, it's over 30 degrees, and the moon is casting its light more brilliantly than usual. My friends and I are eating dinner when we all decide that it's a nice night to drive out to the small town about 15 minutes away from campus where we'd previously gone hiking and found a dilapidated, abandoned dam. At the time, my friends and I were pretty heavy stoners, so our main goal was to hike to the dam and smoke weed. The dam, however, has nothing but a 2 to 3 foot wide ledge to walk on for about 100 feet before intersecting with a significantly larger crossbeam that is wide and long enough for 5 people, the number of our party, to sit and smoke comfortably. Beneath the ledge and crossbeam is nothing but water from the river, disgustingly green in color and fecal in odor. There are a multitude of holes in the concrete of the dam, both in its walls and the ledge/crossbeam we had to walk on, eaten away by years of neglect. The dam is not a safe place to be, but we're young and adventurous, so naturally, we were excited by the prospect of being somewhere we shouldn't be. Plus, the dam was more or less a long, domed tunnel that had an incredible view of the winding river beneath it, in addition to the lush trees and picturesque night sky full of stars overhead. Sure, we were dumb for being there, but the dam is truly fascinating and beautiful. It was a great spot to smoke, until we met Derek. The only person who had a functioning car at the time was our wildcard friend, Max. He does things like put snowballs in his sheets, throw bang snaps around the room at random times to freak you out, and replace the vodka in the fridge with water. This is by far his most infuriating prank. He also does things like bring bread to a smoke sesh so we can feed the ducks. We often smoke at a pond, hide candy in your clothes pockets, and wake you up with a bowl of weed ready to go on weekends. He has 2 sides to him, a genuine representative of the chaotic neutral. He just loves it when things happen unexpectedly. Regardless, none of us were particularly keen on having him drive because of his unpredictability, but we didn't have another option. About an hour later, the 5 of us pile into Max's car and drive to the dam. It's abandoned and empty, as always, and we're the only car parked in the cul-de-sac entrance. Now, the entrance is an entrance to a forest that you have to hike about a half a mile into before reaching the dam. We hop out, and before we start following the trail, Max goes to the trunk of his car and pulls out a Roman candle. The rest of us tell him to put it back. We don't want to make too much noise. You're such a dumbass, Max, etc. He brings it anyway, against our judgment because, well, that's Max. When he's finished locking his car and grabbing his stupid fireworks, we start on the trail. Imposing trees casting dancing shadows around us as we walk to the dam. We get there and carefully stroll the narrow ledge to the safety of the crossbeam, constantly having to avoid holes in the concrete below us. Eventually, we're situated. We start smoking and talking, warning Max 1,000 times that he better not light off that Roman candle. Our voices resonating and echoing throughout the domed dam. Suddenly, someone calls down. "Yo," he says. We freeze and shut up. Our first thought is cops, and after ruling that out quickly, our second thought is, fuck. "Who's down there?" he says. Max's ears perk up. His eyebrows furrow as if he's thinking. We can hear the guy take a few more steps. "Derek?" Max says. "Who's that?" "It's Max. We went to so-and-so high school together." Of course Max knows him. Derek ambles his way down and walks to the ledge to our smoke spot on the crossbeam. He and Max reminisce and share some small talk. Max seems to like him, but he's throwing me off. Something about him doesn't seem right. I look around at my other friends and they all seem to be feeling the same way as their expressions match mine. The entire time he's here, he's texting furiously. He's also standing an awkward distance away, leaning against the wall of the dam. And he seems very fidgety, but he's friendly and Max knows him, so none of us say anything. We offer to smoke him up, but he declines. A thought pops into my mind. What is this guy doing out here by himself? It's important to note that it's nearing midnight at this point, so it's unusual for someone to be out here alone, without hiking apparel, and no intention of being a hooligan like us. Plus, he's stayed here way longer than he should have. He only knows one of us, and not very well. Yet, he stayed here and talked for 20 minutes. It felt like he was waiting for us to be done. But why? Where have you been, Derek? I haven't seen you around much like I used to.
Just got out of jail.
Okay, maybe he caught a possession charge. Could happen to any of us. Man, that's a bummer. Well, welcome back.
Thanks. 3 years is a long time.
Alright, hold up. You must have had a lot of weed on you.
Yeah, that didn't help. The armed robbery charge accounted for most of the time, though.
We gotta get out of here. That's the only red flag I needed. Another friend of mine starts talking to Derek about the Bears. He's wearing a football jacket, to distract him while I start packing up our stuff. In the middle of their conversation, Derek makes a phone call and whispers a few inaudible words before hanging up, without saying goodbye. It's a 15-second call, maximum. When he hangs up, he goes back to the conversation like nothing happened. Eventually, I get everything in my backpack. We all get up to leave and start heading down the ledge, Derek in front. Before we get far, Max stops us and says, "Watch this." He pulls the Roman candle out from his bag, and before any of us can stop him, he lights it. We all freeze. I remember watching the flame burn slowly down the wick, like a football coach watching the opposing team run the game clock out, full of dreadful anticipation. It reaches the candle and thump. We watch helplessly as the firework shoots from the candle. But it only takes about half a second for it to reach the opposite end of the dam, but it felt like an eternity. Bang! The firework explodes into a brilliant display of red light, illuminating the entire dome, splitting our eardrums. After we admire the beauty and process what just happened, we start running. But Derek is well ahead of us now. He started running right when Max lit the candle. We're trying not to fall into the water or trip on any holes as we run, exhilarated and full of adrenaline. The candle continues to blast, Max cheering and shooting its rockets into the air and into the woods as we run, now free of the dam. We're following Derek, as he apparently took the same way into the dam as we did. But as we reach a clearing in the trees, I notice something. There were 6 of us, including Derek. There are now 8. I pause to examine my surroundings, and as I do so, 2 other men pop out from behind trees and start running. Now I'm freaked out. We finally reach the exit, the candle still blasting. When we reach the exit, there is a van parked perpendicular to the trail, blocking our way with a man standing outside. Derek yells, "Go, go, go!" and the 6 guys leap into the van before peeling off faster than a NASCAR driver at the start of the Indy 500. The candle goes out, and we hop in Max's car. We're all saying things like, "That was crazy, what the fuck, Max? Let's get out of here." About 5 minutes later, my friend says, "Hey, I think we almost got mugged." We dodged a fucking bullet thanks to Max the wildcard. I can't even imagine what would have happened had Max not brought that candle and scared them away. Derek, let's not meet.
One sunny day in mid-spring, the three of us were bored and decided to go exploring. We headed down an old canyon road that's pretty popular amongst us locals. Once we parked, we started walking along a relatively flat, old dirt road overgrown by the long green grass. There were a lot of ladybugs. There must have been millions of them, all flying towards us as we were walking along. As we walked along, we noticed an old abandoned house just a little way off the path, surrounded and covered by oak trees. The small, rectangle, dilapidated house had one of those old wood shingled roofs, featuring much of the same for the siding. The house looked like it had been from the 20s or 30s era, with an old outhouse in the back. When we stepped up the 2 or 3 rotten steps into the house, we were greeted by an old sofa and armchair across from a really cool brick fireplace. In the bedrooms, we found old metal bed frames and mattress springs and such. The kitchen still had its old cabinetry, with the doors hanging off its rusted hinges. We split up to go explore the house and take pictures, and to just generally poke around a little more. All of a sudden, we heard a loud thump that seemed to come from everywhere all at once. We all hurried out of the house at the same time and met up outside. As we gathered outside, we shared the look of, "What the fuck?" We sat outside and smoked a little while, calming down and chatting. It was a beautiful day out, 70s, with chirping birds and chattering insects. As we sat in the overgrown wispy grass amongst the green lupins, we decided that we were idiots and just heard a tree branch hitting the house or something. So we headed back inside to explore more, and I ended up sitting by myself in one of the condemned bedrooms. I decided to smoke and take a minute to chill. I was leaning back against the wall opposite an old rusted out mattress and frame, with my eyes closed and zoning out, but then all of a sudden there were 3 loud thumps. They hit so hard, I felt it in my back that was against the wall. Dazed, I sat up and didn't know what to do until I heard my 2 friends talking excitedly from the outside. I darted out of the dilapidated front door towards my friends. As I finally got to them, we all just stared at each other with confusion. As I absent-mindedly rubbed the spot on my back that was against the wall, I exclaimed, "What the fuck?" "How the hell should we know?" one of my friends retorted. "Like we said, it's just a fucking tree branch or something." We all sat down feeling defeated by the spooky old house, but yet once again we ended up heading back inside so our friend could finish up taking some pictures. My friend and I hung out in the living room with the old dilapidated brick fireplace. We checked it out to see if maybe we could find an old stash spot behind one of the bricks or something. We were busy with this for a while until we looked up and both realized that it was starting to get dark outside. We looked at each other and were like, "What the fuck happened to our buddy?" So we started calling out for him, going room to room looking for him. We finally found him sitting outside smoking in what once was a flower garden, still sprinkled with daffodils here and there amongst the tall grass. "Dude, didn't you hear us calling for you? You're only like 50 feet away from the house." No, I was actually out here calling you guys." We all just thought it was weird that we didn't hear each other. After smoking some more, we all decided to start walking the 1.5 miles back to my car. Just as we were standing up to gather our stuff and leave, we heard the distorted sounds of one of those old rotary phones ringing. It sounded like it was coming from the house where the living room would be. We all stood there, frozen in place, looking at each other with wide eyes. Naturally, my friend that had been taking the pics was all like, "Shit, I must have left my camera inside the old house." After a couple of minutes of arguing over who was going to go get it, we all just decided to go back in together. When we're back inside again, we realized it's getting pretty dark inside, so we told him to hurry up. I stayed back in the living room while they went off looking. As I was standing there waiting for them, I thought I heard a soft rustling sound coming from the ancient brick fireplace behind me, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there, so I just figured it must have been settling, or there was a critter or something. Just as I turned back around to walk towards where my friends were, a freaking brick on the fireplace went smashing into the wall right in front of me. Of course, I screamed top notch and went running outside. I was screaming to my friends to get the hell out of there. When my friends finally came outside, they looked at me confused and asked, "What did you get a spider on you or something?" I relayed to them what happened, but they didn't fully believe me at first. When I was practically crying, trying to convince them, they finally relented. We all agreed that the old house for sure felt really creepy, so we all three quickly began making our way back to the old dirt road and out of there. On our way out, my backpack strap came loose, and as I took it off to set it down to fix it, I happened to glance up and back towards the old house. I saw what looked to be a dim, flickering light that appeared to be a candlelight in the main living room window that was facing us. I excitedly told my friends to look, and they saw it too. In the end, we all just figured that maybe there was a homeless person living there or something. But then again, I know I was completely alone in that living room. There was nowhere for anyone to hide but the fireplace. And what about the distorted sound of that old telephone ringing? This isn't my story. It's actually my boyfriend's mother who went through this. She told me this story after I mentioned some of the ones here, so I thought this would be a good place to share. When she was younger, before she had my boyfriend, who is 26, she lived in an apartment that was above an insurance agency in the downtown area. The building had businesses on both sides of it, with apartments above as well. Across the street was what used to be a hotel, but at the time had been abandoned for years, boarded up, closed up, broken windows, etc. So I guess she used to do chores and just lounge around during the day naked or scantily clothed because in her head she wasn't on the first floor so no one could see her. One day she started randomly getting phone calls from someone she didn't know, telling her how nice she looked that day or something along those lines and creepy. He apparently would call her once in a while saying things like that and then hang up. This was before caller ID, so there was no way to know where this person was calling from or who he was. This went on for a while until one day she got a call from him while her husband was out of the house. "I'm coming to see you. I know you're by yourself. I saw you." This obviously freaked her out, and since no one else was home, she called her uncle who was in town. She hysterically asked him to come over and make sure this guy didn't do anything. At first, he thought she was crazy and didn't want to, but she wouldn't give up, so he caved and came over. About 10 minutes after the uncle got there, there was a knock at the door. The way she described the door was a school door with a large window in it that is easy to break into. Her uncle came out and started threatening the guy and cursing him out. The guy quickly turned around and ran back down the stairs, but as he turned around, she saw 5 inches of the knife handle sticking out of the guy's pocket. It turns out this guy had been one of her close friend's neighbors, and I guess he started stalking her for a while. He would go to the abandoned hotel across the street and watch her, then leave to go somewhere else to make the creepy phone calls. She never did find out how big the knife was or what he intended to do with it.